Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
The last discussion.
Hi.
I'm fine.
Crazy. Insane. I can start it to get us started off, I guess. I just did one thing sheet for this time, and I just did it on like a summary of kind of all the readings put together. So for the key ideas, I talked about how one of the main things that we've learned about and talked about how reading fluency is the combination of rate, accuracy, and automaticity. Um, and automaticity. And then I talked about how student engagement is a critical component of literacy instruction. Confident, motivated students who have positive past literacy experiences are more likely to participate in reading and writing activities, challenging themselves, and also developing positive reading identities. And students learn vocabulary best when they have active discussions with their peers. They have visual aids and can apply new vocab words into meaningful context that they can connect with personally rather than just simply memorizing a new word.
Yes, I put a lot of those too. I wrote about how some old practices, such as round robin reading, are ineffective because they reduce meaningful reading time, increase student anxiety, and often shift students' attention away from comprehension. Instead, there are many other evidence-based strategies that provide students with more reading practice and are more effective. I wrote students become better readers when they have positive reading experiences that build confidence. Uh, Engagement is very much a critical component of development. Students obtain vocab most effectively through repeated exposure, explicit instruction, meaningful discussion, and opportunities to use new words. Um, the fluency slides I wrote described fluency as the bridge between word recognition and comprehension. And reading fluency is more complex than we think. It consists of accuracy, rate, and prosody, and those components work together to support comprehension, allowing fluent readers to focus on building meaning rather than just decoding words.
I said similar stuff to you and Maria. Um, I also added that readers who can read fluently are able to focus on understanding the text they are reading rather than just the logistics of the words. Vocabulary instruction can play a big role in reading comprehension, which can also help with reading fluency. And to successfully comprehend a reader, must be incorporating the three cognitive layers, which was talked about in the slideshow: comprehension, monitoring, actually understanding the text, building the text base, which is connecting ideas, and building the situation model, which means using background knowledge to help you read text.
I said very similar things to Maria. I talked about how authentic and challenging literacy tasks can help students see reading and writing as useful beyond school, especially when tasks include collaboration, student choice, and real world purpose. I also said that engagement matters because students are more likely to persist, think deeply, and participate when they have a choice, meaningful talk, and text that matter to them. And then I said that reading fluency is more than just reading quickly, but it also includes accuracy, automatic word recognition, and expression, which support their comprehension when reading.
Nice. And then for the evidence and quotes that stood out, I talked about how it mentioned in the slides that comprehension strategies are more like tricks rather than long-term skills, and how the slides just highlighted that having vocabulary and background knowledge are essential for lasting comprehension. And if a student doesn't really have access to like high frequency vocabulary words or just new vocabulary words in general and aren't exposed, they're going to have a hard time getting that comprehension skill down. And then something else that stood out to me was that students should not read in front of peers until they have practice, which reminded me how important it is to create just like an inclusive and supportive learning environment where students can build confidence and just be able to not feel scared before having to read out loud like a passage to the class or something like that.
Love those. I wrote again about round robin reading provides very little actual reading practice, causes many students to worry about when their turn will come, and decreases both engagement and comprehension. I wrote that the Willingham's reading argues that while comprehension strategies have value, students comprehend texts more successfully when they have strong vocab and background knowledge. The fluency slides stated that reading with teacher guidance and corrective feedback improves word recognition, fluency, comprehension, and overall reading achievement. And fluency provides the bridge between word recognition and comprehension. That idea reminds me that fluent reading allows readers to focus on understanding the text opposed to figuring out how to say each word.
Okay. One idea that stood out to me was that the goal of fluency is comprehension and not just speed. So this challenged the common idea that the faster reading was always means stronger reading, but in reality, it's not. It's students who are able to have better comprehension when reading are more fluent readers than being able to read the words faster. And then I also said that the idea of the point of comprehension is to do something that matters. So this shows that students do not just have to read to answer questions, but to think, respond, create, and take action for what they're reading. So they don't just get bored of the idea of reading because they're just reading to answer stuff, but they're actually reading for a purpose.
I chose two quotes. Um, pause it. The first quote I chose is from the fluency slides, and it says, because non-fluent, because non-fluent readers focus much of if because non-fluent readers focus much of their attention on figuring out words, they have less attention to devote to comprehension. And then the second quote I chose is from chapter 5 of the textbook, and it says, "We believe the primary principle of reading fluency, as in any task that requires automatic or near automatic performance, is authentic practice. Like many other tasks in life, practice is essential in developing proficiency." And I just think that is good to show that with literacy, you need to practice and model and explicit instruction for students. Sorry, I'm so giggly.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yes, I agree. And then for the connections, I talked about how, well, I said this connects back to phonemic awareness and phonics, helping students decode words accurately, which we learned about in the last class that we took with Dr. Green and talked about a little bit in this class too. And I said this week's readings add on to what I already knew, highlighting that automatic word recognition leads to fluency, which then leads to comprehension. Without having phonemic awareness and phonics skills learned, children will not be able to master automatic word recognition, which will lead to them struggling with fluency and comprehension. So just kind of added on that and like solidified that students don't just automatically learn fluency. There's steps prior that they need to have mastered before they can learn fluency and before they can learn comprehension and all of that.
Love it, Maria. I agree. For connections, I wrote that these readings connected heavily to my teaching experiences. In my first grade classroom during student teaching, I regularly incorporated repeated partner and choral reading to build fluency, opposed to asking students to read aloud one at a time with round robin. These were made fun and were implemented in a variety of different ways. I led the RTI reading groups, and during this time, my SBTE discussed with me why round robin is not effective. During that placement, I experimented with alternative evidence-based strategies, I noticed that students became more confident and expressive after hearing fluent models and practicing texts multiple times. I observed that students were much more motivated when they could choose books that matched their interests and their reading abilities.
I connected it to um myself as a reader when I was in elementary school. I said along with the research about round robin reading, as a student, like I personally never liked it because it often caused me stress. And when I was going to get called on to read, I was just thinking about what part am I about to read and what line am I, um, and thinking about when it would be my turn. And then I realized how this strategy caused me stress rather than comprehending what I was reading. And then that kind of goes hand in hand with the round robin article and just how it has more negative impacts on students. And then I also connected this to my student teaching placements when I got the opportunity to teach reading and phonics from the very beginning of the unit. And I got to see the progress of the students made. And I noticed when students felt confident with the vocabulary being used that they tended to read more fluently and progressed with their reading levels.
I also connected it to some of my teaching experiences because um recently I was a building sub and I got placed as the reading teacher there. So I got to like experience a lot with this. And one of the skills that we were really practicing in our group was fluency. So they were doing like 1 minute timed readings every day, or at least twice a week, I would say. And we would see how they would progress. So I said that I've seen how students can read words accurately, but still need support with their expression, pacing, and understanding, which is a lot of the ideas that we went over with. Um, so like we practice our expression when we were reading, we practice our pacing when we were reading, and also like our understanding of the main idea of the text. Um, And then I also talked about how interactive read alouds and vocabulary instruction, which me and Anna focused on in our Pillars project, that students need explicit teaching, but they also need discussions, visuals, word work, and chances to use new words in meaningful reading and writing tests for them to fully get an understanding of it.
I do agree. And then for the questions, one of the questions that I came up with was how can teachers build students' background knowledge while also addressing the required curriculum standards by the school or by the state? Because I feel like a lot of times it can be a hard balance for teachers with wanting to teach things or wanting to teach certain things to students or wanting to just give students certain experiences, but not being able to relate them to the standards set by the school. So then they're not able to give the students the background knowledge that they want to. And then another question I came up with was what are ways a teacher can help a student who is able to decode accurately but struggles with oral expression? Kind of going on with like the round robin. Like I remember when I was in school, like I was the same way like Anna, where before we would do a reading, I would always practice whatever paragraph or whatever sentence because I was more scared of messing it up than actually I was able to decode it accurately, but I was more scared of messing it up because I was nervous than actually understanding and comprehending what I was reading. So I just thought that was a good question to ask.
I also really like that question because I agree. I definitely experienced the same thing when doing that as a student. Another question was about how teachers can effectively build students' background knowledge. Another one was what assessment tools best capture fluency. How can vocab instruction remain explicit while still being authentic and engaging? And what are the best ways to maintain reading engagement as students read more complex texts as they get older?
I questioned the why is round robin reading so common in classrooms if there is like so much research and data that shows that it has negative impacts on students' feelings. like how can we kind of phase that out of classrooms? Because it is like, I've seen it happen in classrooms. It's definitely still common and still relevant in classrooms because it's just kind of like a go-to for teachers, I feel like. But I feel like we should start to phase that out if it does cause students negative impacts. And then I also had the question of what is the most common assessment for reading fluency?
I asked two questions, but I feel like they can kind of go into a mix of one because I asked about how repeated readings, how we can make them feel more purposeful and engaging instead of boring and repetitive for our students, and also a balance of student choices when choosing books to read because I know how important it is for them to choose their own books to read just because it'll keep them more engaged with the reading. But also making sure that the texts that they are choosing from are still challenging them and building on new vocabulary to them. Um, because if a text is just too easy, then really reading it is not helping them grow as a reader because it's kind of just keeping them at the same level. So just like finding a mix of books, which I feel like being close with your school librarian, which I feel like when I was in my student teaching, they told me that was like the most important thing that you could do because they're really helpful. So it'd be good to like have them by your side to create a classroom library where the books are um, relatable but meaningful.
I agree. I didn't think about that, but that's a really good. I like what you said, Kaylee. For the critical ones, I said the reading highlights that literacy instruction should be accessible to every learner through evidence-based practices, student engagement, and differentiated support, rather than assuming all students learn vocabulary or fluency in the same way or pace. It is important teachers scaffold and differentiate instruction to meet each student's individual needs because at the end of the day, not every student learns the same way. Not every student learns at the same rate. So it's really important that teachers like specify and understand what each student individually needs to help them succeed as a learner rather than just think like they all learn at the same rate.
Love that. I wrote equitable literacy instruction means creating learning opportunities where every student has the opportunity to succeed. Fluency slides further emphasize that students benefit from explicit modeling, repeated reading, partner reading, additional practice opportunities, and frequent feedback, opposed to instructional practices that make them feel singled out. Creating supportive, engaging literacy experiences help ensure students can participate confidently and successfully. And round reading discussion highlights concerns about equity because struggling readers, multilingual learners, and students with disabilities may experience embarrassment or anxiety when required to read aloud without preparation.
I also talked about round robin again, and I said the round robin technique shows more negative impacts on students rather than positive. This is because it promotes stress and singles out students. And then I also mentioned the diverse library, tying it to like the beginning of our Zooms that we discussed. And I said using a diverse library and book options can help engage readers and promote new vocabulary, which will also promote fluency and comprehension.
Um, I talked about I said for these readings made me think about how important it is to avoid judging students only by speed because fluency also includes expression, meaning, and comprehension, which I talked about earlier, and that students who speak different dialects are multilingual are nervous readers and may be misunderstood if teachers focus on only rate, which I feel like I saw a lot in my groups because a lot of my students were for different areas and just like the way they acted in the group. Some were more confident when they came to reading, and some were definitely a little quieter, just because they may have felt judged. And then I said that engagement and authentic tasks are also connected to equity because students need access to books and literacy tasks that reflect their lives, cultures, and interests and questions. So when students see themselves and their experience in a text, they are more likely to participate and feel that literacy matters to them.
I agree. And then we do only have like 10 minutes left of this, so do you want to just, when we get to the key takeaways, just say one so we don't run out of time? Okay. And then for the application to practice, I just talked about how in my future teaching career, I plan to make sure that I'm scaffolding and differentiating instruction to meet each student's individual needs. I also make sure to include effective literacy practices such as partner reading, echo reading, and rehearsal reading into students' daily routines, and just make sure to keep in mind that not every student is going to learn at the same pace, not every student is going to learn the same way. And when it comes to fluency, students could have one skill mastered and not the other skills. So it's important to know which out of the three skills they do know and which out of the three skills they need some extra help in.
Love that. I said that these readings will impact my choices moving forward. I hope to teach fluency using evidence-based strategies such as repeated reading, echo reading, choral reading, partner reading, reader's theater, and phrase cued reading. I will avoid round robin reading because research shows it limits meaningful reading practice and can negatively affect both confidence and comprehension, as we discussed a ton. I want every student to spend as much time as possible actively reading and receiving constructive feedback. I plan to provide explicit vocab instruction before, during, and after doing read alouds while encouraging students to use new vocab in discussions and writing. I'll monitor their fluency using assessments, establish individualized goals, and adjust instruction based on progress. I want to build a classroom environment where reading is enjoyable, students have the ability to make meaningful choices, and every single learner feels successful, capable, and motivated.
That was beautiful. I would like to apply my knowledge to my future classrooms by using different reading techniques rather than round robin. Like both of you said, I would like to incorporate whisper reading, echo reading, stop and think, taking turns, and reading silently. I think all of these techniques will be beneficial for students for reading strategies, especially the variety and when you mix in different strategies to help. And then I also want to explicitly teach vocabulary to ensure that my students are gaining not only vocabulary instruction, but also comprehension and fluency skills.
I said that in my teaching experience, I would use fluency activities such as co-reading, partner readings, readers theater, poetry, and repeated readings with the real purpose. So not just focusing on, or I'd focus on expression meaning and not just how many words they can get correct per minute. Especially readers theater because I did this in my reading groups and they seem to really enjoy it. So I would recommend readers theater. Um, and then I also said that I plan vocabulary and comprehension lessons that include student-friendly definitions, morphology, discussion, word sorts, thematic maps, and writing responses, which me and Anna talked about all in our presentation. And then instead of only using worksheets, I'd give students authentic tasks like creating a poster, book recommendation, debates, presentations, or written responses for a real audience just to get them more involved in doing something different so that's not boring and repetitive tasks that they'll be doing. So, yeah.
Nice. And then for the key takeaways, one that I said was strong reading comprehension does not rely solely on comprehension strategies. It relies on background knowledge, exposure to vocabulary, and fluency. Comprehension strategies, I feel like they're more so kind of like the cherry on top of like that saying, like the cherry on top of Sunday. Like they're helpful, but they're not, a student can't rely solely on just those in order to become strong at comprehension.
Love that, Maria. I wrote fluency is more than reading pace. It includes accuracy, automaticity, I believe, expression, and comprehension. It develops through explicit modeling, repeated reading, and meaningful feedback.
I said that fluency not only involves quickly, oh gosh, I'm laughing again, how quickly the student is reading the text, but also how accurately and expressive the student is reading. It's important to also set goals for the student and track progress of their reading fluency to help determine what supports the student's needs in order to progress with reading fluency skills.
I said that fluency should be taught as accuracy, automaticity, and expression that works together to support students' comprehension, and that vocabulary and comprehension instruction should be interactive and connected to meaningful reading and writing activities, and that students are more motivated when literacy tasks include choice, collaboration, challenge, and a real-world purpose.
Yay!